bodies in the graves and things like that. Now, in the time, what happened was the whole place was absolutely lawless, really. And the British government described Brosna as an asylum for murderers and thieves and all kinds of... they couldn't control it, but they said they would control it. Up here it was... actually, there was no road from Castleinland that time. The big... I'm referring back to Mount Teague again. The road was from Castleinland. Castleinland wasn't much either, by the way. Corder was actually more important. Corder, Knockatee, and up to Fairfield above, and Drummond, the big place up there. And they wouldn't even think of looking down here. But down here around 1830, there was about 16 houses and no roads. That was the way it was. So this settlement in its own, obviously, going back to the times. So Fairfield, anyway, he decided he was going to stay in Ireland, which he did, and he got the whole area of Toreen and Scarta for himself. 722 acres, no road in one patch. And Drummond took off with his sister-in-law over to England. And he had a big job over in England. He was extra groom to Queen Victoria. So he was going for the big job. Groom for Queen Victoria. But there was no colonel there before him who to pass out, which he ultimately did, Lumley. And he got the groom in waiting to Queen Victoria. That was the kind of lads these were. His uncle, Berkeley Drummond as well, owned a bank in London. Drummond's Bank was called. And they were bankers to the king and bankers to the regiment. They had great customers. Everybody that was in the regiment in the British Army, they were huge that time, were all the pay to go through them. So he really made customers. They became huge. There is 49 Charing Cross Road, as I said, but if you went there today, you wouldn't find it because it's now the Royal Bank of Scotland, RBS. They bought him up in 1924, but they made millions of it. But in the meantime, anyway, this was the accessibility in travelling. The big important towns were Castleinland meant nothing and Abbeyfield meant nothing. Newmarket did, Newcastle West did, and actually Tralee because it was a port. They meant it all right. But this fellow Griffiths, who decided he was going to, he built all the roads. He built a road from Newmarket called the Cot Line over this way, and that opened up that side of it. And at the same time, Griffith also built a road from Newcastle West on up to Castleinland. That brought in Abbeyfield and was the status of Abbeyfield and the status of Castleinland. The road built over there, if you watch, there are bridges under every one of those roads. The road from Newmarket to Listowel cost 25,318.26, and the one from Newcastle West to Castleinland cost slightly less. There was 50,000 invested in it in 1826, 27, 28. So you can imagine the amount of people that were working the roads that time to do all those. The roads were 32 feet wide and 26 for mettling. Mettling means where we actually travelled on, and they built the bridges as well. And they built the bridge behind at Fields Bridge, as we call it, but that wasn't called Fields Bridge. That was called Wesley Bridge, after the Duke of Wellington. He had won the Battle of Waterloo, and they were calling him. He was everywhere. Waterloo and Wellington are all over the place. And that bridge was built in 1828 for the massive sum of money of £4,660. Can you imagine that sum of money? That was built, and then he moved on to, on that road. Then they moved on to Headley's Bridge, and that road was built. That bridge was built for £1,161, I think. And all the bridges along there for the Breda, Ahan, the one below the Clyde there, that was a dear one as well. That was £590 there. So he did network going. The next thing Fairfield did then was he actually built the road down from Rackoshley down along the River Clyde. And if you notice, it came down at the bottom of the village, and there was nothing down at the bottom of the village because they've told you it is all from the Lodge sign up. That's what it was that time. And he built on, the idea was he'd link the road below at Patsy's Cross, which he did. Now can you imagine now, like, you had Brosna lined up straight away, the people in Brosna could go down there, they could go to Abbeyfield like that, they could go to Newmarket like that, and that road was done like that. That was the reason. At this stage, there is no road from Castleinland to Brosna, none. But they decided, Fairfield anyway organised the people, the landlords in it, Lord Dean as I told you, and he got onto Drummond over, that was mining the Queen, and they put up a sum of money, and they built the road from Castleinland to Brosna, down by the bridge down there, and that was built in 1838 for £800, and it's still there. Right, so now you can see the network coming. This is fierce and party now because the place was isolated. So Fairfield is coming out from Castleinland this way, and he decides, Janie, I have to go down to Brosna, and he'd have to come up the Barnes Road, the Barnes Road, So what does he do? And make a shortcut. He cuts in behind it, Knackadarov, and he builds that road. And that's where that road went up, and up to Race Cross, Rackoshley Cross. So at another time, he's coming from Cork, and he says, I'll have to come to this place, Brosna Cross. No. He entered over at the Han Cross, and you know up a Han, and turn left, So you have a whole network of roads. So the whole place is connected by about 1838, 39. All those roads were built. Now in 1840, there is no mention. I have records of everything in Brosna from 1821, but there's no record of all the townlands from 1821. But there's no mention of the population of Brosna until 18. There was. They told me how many houses were. There was 16 houses first of all, and it went up to 20. But in 1851, there were 26 houses in Brosna, and actually there's a network of roads now, and 26 houses in Brosna. When you must keep thinking that it's from the Lotto sign up, that's the village. You get misled by the village, it's so big, do you know what I mean down there? And the population of Brosna in 1851, the settlement, I'm talking about the settlement now, was 109 people. 55 males and 54 females. That's what the population of Brosna in 1851 after the famine, okay? So, but at the same time then, there was actually a church living here. When the penal laws came in, the penal laws didn't affect Brosna high up or low down, because I reckon the penal laws were after the Battle of the Boyne and Taylor to Connacht and all this. But here they continued on with the religion as good as ever. And 1700, when they were hunting parish priests all over the place, we have a record of priests here from 1701. The first parish priest here was the Father Cavan, and like the story, we were responsible for, there was no bishop in Kerry at the time. There was no bishop in Kerry from about 1670 to 1720, because they were banned. And there was a reward in them, and this was it. But we kept the faith going, not only in Brosna, but in Knocknagoshel and Dewar. Kept the three of them going. All one unit. And if we look today, things have come back the same way. They have Brosna, Knocknagoshel and Dewar are the under 12 team or under 14 team. So the configurations are repeating themselves from religion into football. Okay, that was the way it goes. Afterwards then, we seen the priests that were mostly the only parish priests in this place were all educated in Louvain. We were told going to school, but I went up to Louvain. He told me it is Louvain and Nantes and Bordeaux and Antwerp. They were the priests that were here. We have a full succession of priests from 1701 to Father Gunn the other day. In a row, every year accounted for if we want to go into brass tacks in it. Okay, so that was the story. So there was a school going here as well in this place. But Fairfield had a school going above in Mount Eagle. He had 120 pupils in it, including Fairfield had he actually was anxious to get work going. No, you wouldn't be paid much for the work, but the roads are still left there anyway. And he didn't have work on. So he decided, Fairfield, around 1845, that he would organise a fair here in Brosna. And the fair here in Brosna was held on the 12th of May, 1845. That's then the first fair was held here. That's going back a long, long time. And that fair went through the years, and I saw a picture of it there. It was a massive fair. It got so big in 1869 that the fair in Brosna in 1869, the sales were £2,000. £2,000. You can actually, £2,000 collected in 1869. You can actually get the price of the pigs and the in-calf heifers and the springers if you want to. But that's that for here, like, at the moment, but I'm just telling you that. Now, 1845 would be considered one of the worst years in Ireland because of famine, etc. But Brosna, it was lively. The fair was going on, very successful. It went on every month. And actually, before the fair in January, an event happened. It was called the first Brosna races were held in January 1845. There was nothing going on in the store at that time. There was no other store races. I think they just had back around the store at that time. There was faction fights. That's what they were up to. That's what most race meetings started out of anyway. Were faction fights instead of fighting each other. They started to run horses. But the first Brosna races in 1845 attracted great attention, and it was actually reported in a paper, in the national paper, heard about it. And if anybody ever asks you who won the first race in Brosna, in the 12th of January, the 16th, sorry, the 4th, the 16th of January 1845, I'll tell you so you'll know. Yeah. And they were very impressed. On Thursday last, an immense concourse of people from the surrounding neighbourhood assembled to witness a capital race in Brosna. It was more interesting as the principal object of the owners was to test the speed and the bottom of their animals. There used to be deadly arguments between the owners about horses. So there was 3 horses entered in it, and one was one was Prime, the second was Regent, and there was another one called Dinby. Now, during the greater part of the, oh yes, it said Brosna, this newspaper, this is a national newspaper, it said Brosna was an ideal place for a race meeting, and this is the reason why. The course was perhaps a severe test, in other words, hadn't a gallivant. as could be well selected through soft stubble, you know, uneven moor and marsh meadows against a trying hill for nearly a mile. That was the kind of, that was what your nag was facing when we were hitting this. During the greater part of the race, and particularly before gaining the top of the hill, the race was admirably contested. In other words, they were up with each other. The horses preserving regular circus order, you know, 1, 2, 3. You could have covered them all with a counterpane, whatever that was. That's a word back there. That now, on entering the field to the post, this is coming to the trying hill for nearly a mile, Regent's order carried him somewhat off the course. He went on. And for a minute or two left to the rear, but in the last word, he moved his antagonist like a locomotive and won. So Regent won the first race in Brosna on the 6th of January 1845, and there wasn't even a thought about the Listowel races at that time. Okay, so we were leaders in the field in the year 1845, started with a bang with a race meeting and a big fair, and the race meeting actually kept going big till 1860. There were some real ones there, and Josie and Curtin revived it for 2 more years. And so in other words, you could really say up to the millennium, you could say there was racing in Russia from 1845 to 2000. So that's a one for you know, like, you know, it's there. The fair kept going to the mats out, and that's that. So that was the happenings that were in one of the worst years in Ireland in 1845. There was plenty activity going on here. Now above the lodge, as I told you, that was the centre of society. And Fairfield, not only a man of his keeping, he had the money, and he decided he'd build a fine big house for himself, which lasted in which is our own. And he built it with coach houses and everything, because he had important people coming out from Killarney and all these people, and lads that wanted a bit of relief from being in the colonial army in Madras. They'd come for a few days and he'd keep them about, and they had big hunting parties, and they had naturally drinking and eating afterwards and things like this. And there's a report of one of them here, and 'tis this. In 1835, he himself established up on the big Montague Lyle, it was called. And it was called Lyle for a certain reason, because Elizabeth, she took over after the early days, and she was killed over there. She died over there before he was killed, actually, by any Ballymac on their own. They took it off the Fitzgeralds, and the Herberts came, and they took it over, and Queen Elizabeth gave them the land, and she gave it to the Gillies in Trinity, so she started doing something with it. Now, anyway, they're above in the lodge, and there's fine lodges above, and we hear that a numerous and highly respectable sporting party assembled at Montague Lyle Lodge in Brosna, the hospitable seat of Captain Fairfield. Sometimes they called him Captain Fairfield. He was a major, all right, on the 20th of August 1835 for the grousing season. Among the company are our much esteemed assistant barrister, Mr. Freeman. Naturally, he was put in as a barrister from the crowd over. An assistant barrister was, I found out after, a state solicitor. We call them state solicitors now. That's what they were called at him. As a matter of fact, I was talking to the state solicitor behind Intree the other day. His name is Eddie O'Sullivan from Oakterard. He'd be the equivalent now of Mr. Assistant Barrister in 1835. This Eddie O'Sullivan. He didn't know this at all, of course. But the thing about it was, he was the assistant, he's the state solicitor behind, he's the fellow you see in the paper prosecuting on behalf of the state. And he's the state solicitor, said, and his father, he's from Oakterard County, Galway. His father was from Brosna. He was up in jail, the guards were stationed in Oakterard, and then went to UCG and became the state solicitor. So, 1835 to 2000 and, what are we, 2017. Okay. Anyway, this assistant barrister turned up, and Mr. Herbert of Muckles. Now you can imagine, he came out from Muckles also. He wasn't coming out to be counting days or anything like this. And we learned later in the day, he was joined by the good and amiable Lord Headley from a Hedgehoe horse. So they all gather up here in Montague. That's why I'm telling you, I know up there you don't see these walking around the road. By the good and amiable Lord Headley. The mountains were well stocked, lads, with game, and we are glad to report that the gentlemen engaged in the manly sport and enjoyed themselves. This was going very well. It was also a haven for lads that were in the colonial office over in India particularly, because Fairfield and Drummond were big in the Indian scene. And we hear that in 1846, this is around the same time as the fair going on here, and the races going on in Brosna, and the boys are having their own sport above, and the lads are having it down here with the races. We hear that a Major Western from the 64th Regiment in Madras, and Lieutenant Bailey, if you don't mind, from the 82nd Regiment in Madras. And we must remember that Drummond's brother-in-law, his uncle was banking all their money over in London in the bank I told you about on Charing Cross, and they were relaxing above here with the other sister's husband. So the crack is good in 1846. And at the residence of Charles George Fairfield Esquire, they came on the 19th of August, if you don't mind, and departed the 27th. They stayed around for a good bit, having bagged during their stay, listen to this, 102 brace of grouse. They shot 204 grouse from over the 20. Are there grouse up there now? No. These boys are up there, right? With several braces of hair as well.
Patty Cotton is trying to introduce some grouse, I think, and partridge.
No, that's it. Well, this was able to shoot 102 brace of them, right? Okay. And then the common thing was from these people that went around him, I never saw the young game more advanced. Owing to strict preservation, there was an abundant stock of game with more than a sufficient stock left for breed. So, in other words, call around again next year, okay? So that was the carry-on that was here. The local people were having their races, their fairs, the so-called gentry, which we didn't have to come as like, from Lord Headley and all these people coming out and enjoying themselves above. So you can imagine the social life in Brush and the family going on all over the country. So this is the story that was going on here. So we'll move along here now, and actually there was a church there and a school, and that was this configuration there. But things started happening here now in this church in one side of the wall, I suppose. We're out here. It was decided, the famine, that was the famine later on, but the famine actually went on to 1854. But believe it or not, things improved very strong agriculturally in the country from about 1858 on. And actually, if we look at back the history of the cathedrals that were built in Ireland, they were nearly all built, and there was nothing there a few years before them. So they got into the act here as well, and there was a Father Moriarty was his name. He was the parish priest here, and in 1865, 1867, he started deciding that he would build a proper church here in Brosna from the one that was over there. And he actually, the landlord that time was a fellow called Morris Sands, and he got after Morris Sands, and he got the site from Morris Sands, and he got £1,000 from him as well. And Lady Drummond, that was Drummond's above here, whose husband was the lady in waiting over to the groom in waiting over to Queen Victoria, contributed 100 for it, and there was no messing about it. They decided they'd get the best architects in the land at it, and they got an architect called Pugin was his name. Now he did the cathedral in Killarney, he did Cove Cathedral, he did Salisbury Cathedral in England, he did a certain cathedral in Westminster as well, which I saw. He did St. Aidan's in Wexford, it's a big one like this, and they've all the famous slave design here right at Houston. And he had a young architect with him, a fellow called George Coppinger Ashling from Little Island in County Cork. He took on this fella. It was called, if we were working with a trade, they call it you were apprenticed. But of course there were all distinctions as usual. If you were going to be a solicitor or an architect, you were applicant. They were deadly for distinctions. So this fellow Coppinger was a very talented individual. He was so talented that Pugin, who had done all this huge work, which was mostly ecclesiastical work that he did, decided he'd make him a partner, which he did, as McEnery said, and they got cracking on building the head office at St. Stephen's Green in Dublin. And to make the matter better, Ashlyn married Pugin's sister Mary or something. So the business was going fine, and they came down here, and how we were able to get him down here to build this, I do not know when you consider some of the work they had done. So we'll just give a walk in here, and there's two hallmarks to Pugin's work anywhere in the world. There are Pugin appreciation sites. The three things about Pugin is, first of all, his gothic. You see it, sharp. Whereas if we go to Dublin Park Party there where the buses stopped, you will see all the brick buildings, and you will see doors square like that with panels, and around you, half circle with that. That's Georgian. Georgian is out. There's gone. Such as Gothic was the new style, right? And so it is Gothic, first of all, exemplary stonework. That's another thing that's about it. And tower. They're the three things that are common, whether they're in Cove Cathedral, there was a change in that tower, all right. That tower was supposed to be a little bit more salubrious, which was stopped for some reason. The contract for building the church was 2,000. And I said he got 1,000 from Sands, and he got another, he got more from Lady Drummond, and just picked up. And he was actually able to pay for the church in no time. Now, the church that we're going to is the forum in design, and the nave as you walk up, and the transepts as you walk up are equidistant. That was the mathematics of it. That's why you'd have to be at it for a good few years before they put you a drawing with a biro. Or the pencils that they would have to do with the rubbing out. So anyway, you came in here, so we'll go in here and we'll say...
Try. I hope so. I hope it'll come out, even if it's just verbal.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I'm not really too smart at it, but I hope for the best.
So the building itself, as you can see outside in 2010 how it was stored, and you see the stone thing that I've accentuated is coming out. The next thing about this church are the stained glass windows. There are three main ones up there. There are several, of course, as you can see. And the actual name of this church on the drawings in St. Stephen's Green in Dublin in 1869 is the Church of St. Captage and Molan. That's it in black and white. That's what's in the blueprint of the drawings. And the design of the windows were done by the two biggest, that would be the James Scanlons at the time. And we've James Scanlon here now, as good as any one of these, were a fellow called Harry Clark and a fellow called Shiny was his name. And they used to work together. And the strength, even in darkness here, you can see the strength about any of those windows that are designed by those people, even though any of the three windows aren't done by Harry Clark. There's not a Harry Clark window in this church. There are 150 of them in Ireland. But he was the man that promoted it and the designed it. He designed it, and he was trained by his mentor was Child, like they all had mentors. But the thing about the evening darkness, the thing about these windows that have the ethos of Harry Clark and A.E. Child they're bright, even in darkness. And the big colour he has is blue and red. And if you go into different Church of Ireland churches, you see different churches that are different shades and different interior designs. And that's the way it is. So the thing about the church, what I say about it, it was Puritan design, and the windows were of the high class at the time as well. 1869, this ecclesiastical edifice was built here in Brosna in real bad times, and it is here since. And as I was saying, it was 1869, so we're 2 years away from 150, so we better start to 150. And that's in 2 years' time you can start now, okay? So I'll say that's the church, okay? Right. It is, yeah, buried back the road, right? Now, every day you come in and out of this church and you would get a drop of holy water and you would throw it at each other and make the sign of the cross. But this is a fierce important holy water font, as is every holy water font in every church, because the name written down it is Richard M. Nocton. He was the parish priest here during the famine. And his brother was a parish priest in Boherbee. He was a curate to him. This Richard was a curate to John. John was the parish priest in Boherbee, which is Kilmeen. And when John got a bit of promotion from a bishop, he came to Brosna. Richard got promoted here, he came to Brosna, and John came out to visit him as a parish priest with plenty of experience, and he did look around the place, and he decided that maybe Brosna, ecclesiastically now, not civilly, should be increased. So he made a decree with the bishop that Knockaclarrig, Clook, Capafardine, Turin Finine should be removed from Boherbee and put into the parish of Brosna. So that is why the Cork side, that's why we're a parish in two counties and a parish in two baronies, Duhallow and Suckanakna, where we are. That's how that happened, and that was in 1845. His name was Richard Nocton. Now Richard Nocton around the famine time came under tremendous pressure, because at that stage, believe it or not, even though it was done nice and cute, the Church of Ireland started recruiting people. And they're Christian religion like ourselves, and they were actually very successful in Dingle and in Vintry, and they were looking for people to convert to their faith, and they were very successful, I said. And there's a place in Dingle called the Colony. They recruited 800 one day. It's called the Colony, from the Catholic Church to the Church of Ireland. I don't like calling them Protestant because it's Church of Ireland. They're Anglican and they're Christian like ourselves. So they were gaining here, and this was decided here that they target Brosna for recruitment, for converts, and the Catholic Church rebelled. They called any fellow that converted a pervert. The meaning of the word today, now, like, can you imagine, like, this was the carry on, but there were a lot of inducements. If you were a farmer, you got a better rent, and which also meant that your neighbour was being thrown out, which was very troublesome. So that was the carry on that was there, and I'll discuss that when we get as far as that bell over there. Okay, now before I leave the bell at the churchyard, I want you to take it down to one headstone here, Father Arthur Murphy. But in 1916, there was another Father Lynch in Brosna. He was a CC, and as the church of Ireland call him, a North CC, a Roman Catholic cure. And this Father Lynch was a pretty famous man. He was a CC. His brother, Finan Lynch, was a minister in the first government when the Free State was set up. He was a minister in that government. His brother was the CC here. This Father Lynch is a different man. But Father Murphy is down here. This is the man that was killed. This man is possibly the most important man around Brosna for a long time. His name is the very Reverend Arthur Canon Murphy. Among other things, he was the first canon that was ever a parish priest in Brosna. We never had a canon, a parish priest in Brosna, except him. He came from Milltown in the county Kerry, and he was around the time of the land war and the settlement of land, and the bishop caused a bit of agitation, and the bishop moved him around up to this door, but eventually he came back in here. And this, he came here in 1903, and he was here till 1916 when he died. But what happened in 1903, there was an act in England called the Wintham Act. They were so fed up of the landlords getting burned out and lads' mutilations and shootings and all kinds of things, police retiring and everything from the pressure, that they decided they formed a thing like an army, and they gave a lot of money to the government, and they formed a thing called the Congested District Boards. And the landlords were so afraid that will he make a deal with him? And he organised all the deals with him. The way you bought the farm was, he's actually responsible for the settlement of nearly every farm in Brosna and in Knocknagoshel too. He sorted out all the land in the estate, Headley estate, the Drummond estate, and the Sands estate. Right? Now what happened was, there was a valuation in your land. Now the landlord, even though he was getting burned out and all this, wanted as much as he could off you. That was the deal, even though there was a big sum of money there in the Congested District Board. And the way it was worked out was, the benchmark was your valuation. And the landlord did look for 23.5 times your valuation. That was whatever landholding you had was yours, then if you could come up with that. But that was outlandish. So they were arguing down at 16 times the valuation. That's what was worked out. And they were eventually worked out. The first man to break cover was Dean over in the eastern side. He consented to the landlords. The landlord had another problem as well, because lads hadn't paid up for 3 years. So there was arrears, and he wanted 23.5 times. They're giving him 16, and he wanted to get out the place fast, but he wanted a few bob, and he went to London, because it was dear over there as well. So the thing about it was, because Father Casey Brown Abbey failed, what the monument is, there's a lot to talk about him with the land league, but actually he was a friend of Father Murphy's, and free speech was banned in Abbey Fair. And they came up here, and this was where your man, Father Canon Murphy, negotiated all the settlements in those places. And he did an awful lot to say in the carry-on. He died in 1916. And 1916 was the year the lads beheaded in Knocknagoshel. We were all, Brosna and Knocknagoshel were all the one parish. And the lads beheaded in Knocknagoshel, and I wouldn't blame them, were coming here to Mass all the time, and they said they would want a church of their own. And actually, it was a priest before Father Knockton over there in the Holy Water Font, a Father Toohill, that actually, they had a church in Knocknagoshel, which was administered from Brosna. Father Toohill was his name. And it was a T-O-U-H-I-L Toohill. I never had the name before or after. And he built the church from a Knocknagoshel, which was built out of here. That's the thing that they might know back there, which is a fact. And they're very troublesome back there with Lord Headley and all the crowd behind the Field Bridge. So Knocknagoshel is a state of its own. You know what I mean? Even though we've all relations there. But the thing about it anyway was they eventually consented, and Knocknagoshel decided they would have their own priest, and they broke from Brosna in 1916. That was the year of it. And while they're back in 2017, they have no parish priest. 100 years later, it came back to Roche. So this is the story of what happened there, and that was how the division of the parish was. He died the same year. As a matter of fact, in 1916, that was the time most of the land was settled here in Brosna. They weren't too concerned at all with the 1916 rising till the following year. And in 19, I said Sands gave the site for this, but Sands wasn't the boss. Sands was the landlord. He wasn't the original landlord. I mentioned there was a fellow called Bateman. Bateman was the man. But Bateman went broke after the famine. Loads of lads went broke. Loads of landlords went broke after the famine, as well as the normal fellow died. But the landlord went broke. So Bateman got broke. He had 2,000 acres of land. And he was behind in Tralee there in Carrigain, Daniel, and where the Grail football field is. And you know that big site up there, Collar Sands? That was his house in Oak Park. That's where he lived. He was monarch of all, he survived, Bateman. He got stuck in a few elections with Daniel O'Connell and among themselves, and he lost a show in it. So, whether they were big or small, the debts must be paid, and he'd 42 lots of land broken up in his estate, and he was up to Dublin, and they were started selling above in Dublin, right? And the land he had in Brosna was Kilmanhean East, Kilmanhean West, Inchina Park, Brosna Village, Brosna East, and Brosna West. That was his estate, right? So he's selling away above, and he's a clerk naturally, and they're at lot. They're about lot. They sold the Brosna one. Brosna was sold, Brosna East was sold, Brosna West, and the village was sold in 1853 for £6,200 to Morris Sands, the fellow that gave the site for the church. Now he turned out to be a blackguard later when he got squeezed with the rents as well. But anyway, 6,200 the whole shebang went for, and the clerk is clerking away, and there's 13 more lots to be seen, and suddenly he doesn't realise that, Jacobs, we've enough collected. And if we were to see what was involved, lots of money was tied up in legacies to alliances with women. There had to be money given to daughter marrying someone, and there was all these things were encumbered, and there was all mix them, gather them to entangle the whole lot. But after selling so many, shortly after the Brosna one, we've enough, we can clear the debt. So they took the rest of the lots off the market, so he was left with stuff back around the wall and places like that. And that was how that was done. Now when Sands came in, the time of Father Murphy, then with fast forwarding now, like from Sands was getting enough with, he turned out to be a rat renter as well. What they did was, when the going got bad, was they had you would be in your evaluation, and they charged your rent triple the valuation. No one could stick it. No one could stick it. So that was it was gone too high. You couldn't buy like the house in Dublin. So carry on. Nothing changes. So what happened was, Sands decided, or the congested district board, which was the name of buying up these problems, decided that buy Brosna East, Brosna West, and Dirra. Oh, I should have said Dirra was in there as well in the sale for the 6,200. And this time, in 1916, this it was actually just after the winter, as I told you, 1906, it was around 1906, but they said nothing about it. The congested district boards bought a thing that was sold in 1853 for 6,200. They bought it for 68,000. So inflation had galloping in 50 years, even that time. Okay. Now what happened there, and then was this. And there's a thing about this village, and you notice that down the roads there are back roads. There are back roads. And you notice there's plots with every one of them. And every plot is more or less the same. And anybody that was in the village, they were congested, you see. That was what was called the CDB. They decided they'd all give them plots. And there was rumpuses, because there was publicans here. If you were a farmer who get a plot, and there was lads here that said they shouldn't get plots, and there was arguments about it, but eventually it was settled. And the other thing was the landlord was very tough about as well, Turbury rights. And you notice where people in the village have all bogged back the black banks. That was put into it as well. That was another clause in the sorting out of the rents. And the other clause was shooting rights. The landlord still wanted to have the shooting rights when they come out for the summer, like that they could have it, and the fishing rights. And in 1907, if we were caught poaching above there in Cunnagan Crock, where Drummond was, Cunnagan Crock was a high, that was a place for hunting. There was a fellow caught there, and he was hauled up before the courthouse here, and he was fined £7 for poaching on Lord Drummond's land. And the farmer, working for a farmer for 10 months that time, was £10. Fined £7 for shooting a hare above in Lord Drummond's place or catching him with a dog, and the servant girl was getting £4, 5 shillings per annum. I'm talking per annum. So that would tell you the value of money and how things were going. But the land settlement, that's what that man should be remembered for, and he died in 1916. So we've done enough inside the churchyard, so we'll move on another bit.
Remember all those days, so I'll be asking you questions. I'll be asking you questions. I remember one thing that the North regions anyway, those years was in 1916. He's not even looking at me.
No, he's flying.
I find it just with interest. I never knew about animals. I never did anything. I didn't know there was anything of Greek. No. I don't know. I suppose it's just
This bell was rescued by Josie McEnery, Liam Curtin and Daniel Shine. It was supposed to go to Africa. It was a bell that was being left to a Church of Ireland church in Camp. And in Church of Ireland for Camp is Kilgobbin. Kilgobbin, that's the place, that's what they call it. Now the bell is from the Church of Brosna in Kilmainham, Brosna, which was presented by Reverend E. Norman, rector of Brosna, by Miss Answorth Trust of Stratford-on-Haven, the home of William Shakespeare, in 1852. So we're in the famine still at the time, and the Dice of Art Fair, that's what it was called, and the list director is going back, right, fine. So he got this anyway, and he didn't need a bell, and he was to give it to Kilgobbin, and it got stuck behind in some place in Tralee, and Denny Joe saw it when they didn't contact you about it, and we brought it over here. Now, who was this fellow, Reverend E. Norman? He decided, the Church of Ireland was actually in Brosna from 1796. There was a fellow here called Joshua Jones. He was below on Rathkeil, and he, the fellow hired it a £5 a week from the stall to do the Church of Ireland services here. So they were very badly organised. Now he died, and this fellow, Reverend E. Norman, came in the scene. He was from Dublin. He was a solicitor actually, and he got a late vocation, and he joined the priesthood. And like the time they were colonising for people, he decided he'd set up a settlement in the Brosna area, which he did, and he gave the tenants favourable terms, and if he got a certain amount of them up, I think you were to get 70 families or 70 families up, you could have a church and you could have a rectory, and wouldn't you be living out of it? And that was the way it was. So he was highly successful in doing this, and he built behind at Fields Bridge, he built the church behind at Fields Bridge, he had the rectory across the road, which is now the Westering Inn, and there was actually a national school there as well, right in the corner where you go up the road there at an angle. There was a lot of activity going back there. And down below in that place there was a fella, there was a huge domain there, and there was an agent there called Bat O'Connor. He was the agent for Lord Headley and Sands. He was the man that was doing it. And that place back at Fieldsbridge, there's a big house in there in the back. There was about 9 or 10 people working there, and they were keeping track of every square foot of tillage, rinse. They had a Gale Warner, a fellow called Wilson Smith was his name. He nearly got shot one evening over his... They come around a Gale Warner. When you hear of a Gale warning today, it is in the news. But the Gale warning that time was the Rintia. And he come around, the Rintia's doing next week, let's have it ready. You know, this kind of a carry-on that was going on. So he was the man that started back there, and himself and Father Nocton had war over it about there's been deadly carry-on altogether. All, if you worked for him or converted, if you were a tailor or something, the Catholic priest said, there was no more business to that fella. And this was the way things worked. And anyway, it went on and on and on. And even at the end of the day, it would happen that for the fella be getting the last rites, the Church of Ireland give him the last rites. Somebody would hear about it. The Church of our own church would come back to try and get him back at the last minute, and they come back into the scene. And this was serious. Now, this was serious. So he built up the settlement behind of the church, the business behind there at Fieldsbridge, the rectory, and the school, and they were highly successful there. And eventually, what happened anyway? The famine came. So Father Nocton is in the Roman Catholic side, and Father Rector Norman is in this side. He married a lady called McGuinness. She was from Derry. Her father was an important fella in the authorities, and he was a medical doctor plus an officer. He had several stats in him, but he brought her down to Fieldsbridge and settled there, and that was that. But the famine then started in 1840. The famine didn't hit Brosna until about 1847. And the man in charge of all the family in Kerry was Lord Kenmare. That new house that opened in Clan in these times, that's where he is. And he delegated the work down to all the districts, and there was a Brosna Famine Relief founded in 1847. It was actually well into the famine, just 2 years before it hit here. And the man and chairman of it was Fairfield. And the two men with you were the Roman Catholic parish priest and the Church of Ireland. So that was the committee. There was a Father Flaherty here. He caused a bit of a rebellion. He was a curate. He maintained he should be on it. He should be on as well, but he was overruled. And the thing was distribution of food. That was the name of the game. And the food now was pretty shabby. Indian meal and corn and things like that. And they had an argument about where the meal was to be distributed. It was to be distributed in Brosna. That was a depots to bring in the food. The other place behind near Ulizy, Turin a Quig. Back beyond, back that way, and the other place was Fieldsbridge, and they were worried about Fieldsbridge, the Father Nocton, because he reckoned the Catholics back there again. So this kind of an argument went on, and eventually fever broke out in Brosna as well around the same time, and there was a hospital in Cast Island, but they got over that, and in 1847 this was the way the distribution of food was going on. And it actually hit here. Now, the famine, you hear the famine wound up in 1847. It didn't. The famine was still here up to 1854. Because up to 1853, 1854, there was 5,000 in the workhouse in Tralee. And that's only one poor law union like. There's Caharsivy in the stall, etc. Now, what happened as well, who had to pay for that? The people had to pay for that. And the rates here in Brosna in 1845 in the famine were 5 pence in the pound. 5 pence in the pound. By the time it went up actually to 8 shillings in the pound around 1850. Can you imagine that for an increase? Now, to keep a pauper in the workhouse, they were called in-house. And outside house, what they did was, there was way more outside getting relief. The relief was building the roads. And they did a lot of roads and bridges around at the time. And to keep a pauper was 1 and 3pence. And the first meeting held here in Brosna was held here, and this was the collection at the first meeting, the money that came in. Now, this money that came in. The man is the chairman of it, and oh yes. Meeting held in Brosna in January 1847. The Charles J. Fairfield gave a £5. Okay? Ronald Shute, these are all the big lads, he gave £3. Now this fella, Roland Shute, would be important to the Fitzgeralds, because this fella replaced Patrick Fitzgerald. Patrick Fitzgerald was a poor law guardian here, they'd be county councillors, that's what they were, in 1842. He held it from 1842 to 1849. He was our first poor law guardian here. There was also another thing operating around as well called the grand jury. You'd have to be a merchant or a magistrate or a solicitor with that. They'd tell you what to do. Actually, Fairfield was one of them. And they'd be that kind of people. There was no such thing as democracy. If we went for a job, they'd vote no. They didn't like it. That was the way it was done. And then the poor law union guys were the public representatives, and they lasted till 1899. and they became the RDCs, the Rural District Council. Your cousin would be in that, George McAuliffe, in the 18. He was in the last. Actually, George was one of, and J. Jury was on it as well. George McAuliffe, J. Jury, and Cornelius Reedy from up there in Mount Eagle were the three last poor law guards in this country. It was worked out in electoral divisions. You had 3 electoral divisions. You had Guineves, you had Brosna, and you had Mount Eagle. That was the way it was worked out. One of these elected each, and then the RDCs, it changed to RDC then, and the first RDC was your people, Lizzie, J.D. O'Connor, Dennis Jardini O'Connor. He was the first one of those to be in it, and the next one was the Leahy's back in Torrey Sean Mossy, and there were the lads up on it. But eventually the Rumpus started. The money was paid by church, as I said. The Earl of Cork contributed tenner. Herbert behind in the Muckross House gave another tenner. Digby Fairfield, he was about 6 or 7. The father put him down for a tenner, for tin bob. Digby Fairfield, he was about 8. He only lasted 25 years of age. He became an army officer outside in India, and he died there. Master Arthur Airfield went there, the tin bob, and Colonel Drummond over in the bank gave a tenner, and the wife gave another tenner. And eventually they collected at the first meeting here £100. And when you look at it, it was 1 and 3 a week to keep a pauper in the place. And there's 81 and 3s in a pound. So they kept 8,000 going for a week. But it was in your area, depending how many paupers they were sending, the levy was put for everyone to pay. So that's where it went from the 5 pence to the 8 shillings. That's how the thing went down, and that was excruciating. And if we caused any rumpus at all, that went up too much rumpus, extra police would have to be drafted in. And if extra police were brought into your side, there was a fine immediately in the valuation put on of 4 and halfpence in the pound again down on top of that. So in other words, we had to pay for our police bill and security. This was the way, and we were still trying to pay the rent in the arrears. So if we went down at all, we were done. So this was the carry on about it anyway. Now several people